Let's get it going. All right, ladies and gentlemen, good people. All right, welcome to another edition of Riding Dirty Raw. We have the pleasure of having Miss Alicia Cinnamon on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
All right, Toronto's favorite spice.
Yeah,
Okay, so the first thing I gotta ask, is that your birth name or is that a stage name?
stage name.
Okay, why did you choose cinnamon? Why didn't you choose nutmeg or lemon pepper or
It just has a lot to do with my personality. I'm a very spicy person, so it's like you can only take me in small doses. And then I like to say that, like having me around, it can lower your blood pressure if you rub me the right way.
well, you know what? I need to have you around because I have the world's highest blood pressure.
High blood pressure.
I gotta have dental surgery, and I've been back and forth to the dentist since December, and they send me home every time because my blood pressure is so high. One of the nurses one time looked me in my face and said, "Are you stroking?" So
Wow.
I need some cinnamon. I don't know what's going on. But first of all, welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming on, taking time to let us get into the life of Miss Alicia Cinnamon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, I gotta ask, like, what's it like you're from Toronto.
Yeah.
What's it like growing up in Toronto? What's the whole Canadian environment and atmosphere like, especially for young entertainers?
Oh, good question. It's very competitive. Toronto is such a small, how do I explain it? It's like, it's big, but it's small. So if you're from Toronto, you're kind of like in the Mecca. Like Toronto is the equivalent of like the Atlanta, the LA, and New York all combined in one. So if you start off in Toronto, you kind of like, let's say you're from Connecticut, you can go to Atlanta. When you're in Toronto, you're already in the Mecca. So there's so much people that you're competing against and everybody's a star. And we don't actually have a solid industry. Like a lot of us still have to go to the States or the UK to try to make a name for ourselves. So that also increases the competitive levels. And we don't have a lot of unification. I think also because for the longest while, Toronto wasn't really focusing on urban music or Black music. It was mostly like pop rock, alternative country and things like that. So now that the urban scene is actually getting a spotlight, it's like you have people that like everybody woke up in the pandemic and became an artist. So it's very competitive. But I like to say that Toronto, we have the nickname is Screwface Capital. So it's one of those things where like if you can perform in Toronto and get a crowd to move, performing anywhere else in the world is like a breeze. That's how I look at it. So it's like really good foundation to get a backbone.
All right. What was your introduction and what made you realize that you had a talent or you want to be on the big stage?
Well, my dad was one of the founding DJs in reggae and dancehall in Toronto. So music was always something that was a part of me, like all my siblings sing. I'm like a distant cousin of Deborah Cox. So it was just one of those things where, yeah. So it's always been like embedded in me. And I actually started off like doing Latin and salsa dancing first. And then I got into a little bit of acting. And then I realized like I have a voice, but because my sound, like when I was younger, my teacher used to tell me I sounded like Nina Simone. So when you're like 9 or 10 years old, you don't really know what to do with that. So I didn't realize what to do with it until like maybe like following high school, just finishing high school. And like people kept telling me like, you have a really unique voice. So I was like, okay, like always organizing school dances and stuff like that and after school shows and whatnot. And then it just kind of became a part of me when I sang at this young man, Tyson Bailey's funeral in 2013. He was gunned down in Toronto. And when I left the funeral, I asked the family if I could write a song called I Can't Breathe just to pay homage to his memory. And then that kind of catapulted me into the spotlight in the Toronto industry. And that was actually before this Eric Garner passed away in 2014. So it's really the I Can't Breathe the way that we are right now, like it really carries like a real sentimental value in my heart because, you know, I've been saying this for like 7 years.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the momentum you had going up into that funeral, because you were doing funerals, weddings, those different type of things. How did that situation come about for you to actually do that funeral? Were you a friend of the family? Are you someone they solicited? Like, how did you even go into that situation? Did you have any personal type of relationship with the individual, or like, how did that situation even develop?
I was kind of known as like the girl that like what I did. Like I was a daycare teacher, and then I had a few of the teachers that wanted me to do like their 50th birthdays and stuff like that. And particularly in Jamaican culture, like the celebration of your 50th birthday is like a wedding. So when I was doing a lot of those, and then it kind of transpired into the funerals where there was a girl, she was on my Instagram, and she's like, you know, I know you sing, and the family is actually very musical, but they just weren't able to compose themselves to sing. So then she asked me if I was able to do it. So I sang a couple of gospel songs, and that was like the first funeral that I've ever attended. It was the first, you know, dead body, first person I've ever known to pass away. So it hit me like there was like maybe 500 to 600 people there. Schools were shut down. Like it was a really big deal. And there was so much going on. Like people were going to different funerals and shooting up the funerals because there was so much like gang violence that was going on. So it was just one of those things where I was like, I could see this being another level of retaliation if I don't try at least to counteract the energy. So then that's when I came up with I Can't Breathe and just kind of sent it out to the friends and family first. And then I remixed it in 2017 on a reggae beat.
Okay. What is the mindset that you have to be into going in to perform at a funeral? Because the mindset got to be completely different from the mindset going into doing a wedding or a birthday party or that type of thing. And you said, hold on, I don't want to interrupt. And you also said it was your very first ever funeral you attended?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. The pressure of, to me, the pressure of being perfect. Like I'm okay, like I'm a perfectionist all the way through, but I'm okay if I kind of crack if I'm just singing at a showcase or something like that. But at a funeral, it's like you only get one send off. So the pressure of memorizing songs, because you can't prepare for funerals. So a lot of people, they kind of look at me like a jukebox where it's like, can you sing this song, that song, that song? And by the way, the funeral's tomorrow. So it's like, oh my goodness, like memorizing all these stuff. So I really, it's very nerve-wracking, but I also look at it like it's honoring for me. You could ask anybody else and I'm gonna be the person that you want to send off. So I take really extra like precaution in making sure that I give a good performance that the family is satisfactory with. And I think that it prepared me for a lot because about 3 weeks ago, I actually sang at my dad's funeral. And that was probably the hardest hardest performance I've ever had to do in my entire life. And especially like, you know, with this whole virtual stuff and whatever, like it makes it 10 times more, applies the pressure 10 times more. But I realized like as hard as it was, all those funerals that I was doing prepared me for that moment. And I was just grateful. Like to me, it's messed up, but I like doing funerals in a way because it allows that final send off, right? So it matters to me, I guess you could say. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big honor.
Yeah.
Even be asked by a family for you to do that because you know you got to put the people in the right mind frame.
Exactly.
They're already mourning. You don't want to get up there. Yeah, it got to be a large amount of pressure.
Yeah.
Large amount of pressure. Can you speak on the actual situation of the person that you were doing the funeral for and what led up to the I Can't Breathe song? Like, was that a situation that was with police brutality? Like, what was the situation and why did you choose I Can't Breathe?
So with Tyson's situation, he was a 15-year-old boy. It was during exam times and he was hanging out with a friend. And I guess the friend, Tyson was like the high school football star. And he was like the kid that everybody loved. So he was hanging out with a friend and the details are kind of still sketchy. Like the case is still unsolved. But he was hanging out with a friend when I guess some guys pretty much ran up on him, shot him, and then they left him in the staircase, ironically on the 13th floor, to die. The friend went back inside the unit, left Tyson there. They called 911, but he pretty much essentially died in the staircase by himself. And the saddest part about it is that when the paramedics got there, the elevators weren't working, so they had to run upstairs and run downstairs with his body. And they were like, you know, those little moments could have really made a difference and whether or not he lived or died. And it was actually, from what we know, it was you know, a street thing. We don't know the specifics of it, but when I wrote the song "I Can't Breathe," I left the funeral and I went straight to the studio, and it was January, and it was like a blizzard. And I went straight to the funeral and I wrote it. Sorry, I went straight to the studio and I wrote it in about 20 minutes, and I couldn't breathe, because at that point in time, that was the third funeral that happened within that time frame, and they were all interconnected. And like, it was also nerve-wracking for me because the pastor that was at that funeral did 2 other funerals that got shut up because of retaliation. So just understanding, and you know, just I'm very big in Black Lives Mattering past the organization, but I'm that person that they'll call to say, hey, we got a rally coming on, can you come and sing "I Can't Breathe" or something. And so that kind of the "I Can't Breathe," ironically, when Eric Garner passed away, it was like people kept playing my song thinking that it had to do with police brutality. And it was more or less like when our police chief was sworn in, he was the first, I believe, the first Black police chief. And I was asked to sing at his, I guess, his inauguration, his dinner. And I said, you know, I'll only do it if I can sing "I Can't Breathe." Most of the officers turned their back on me because as soon as you hear that title, you associate it with police brutality. But the police chief and his wife, they paid attention, and then, you know, we spoke about it afterwards, and he was like, you know, I remember that case. And basically for me, it was just kind of a way of saying, you know, don't forget Tyson. It might not be police brutality, but, you know, don't forget his story. So.
Okay. What was Tyson's last name?
Bailey.
Bailey. Okay. All right. How did the family respond?
They were very receptive, especially because they picked, well, particular songs they picked at the funeral. They didn't anticipate me writing a song afterwards. And I actually, when I wrote it, I'm sure you're familiar, Etta James, "I'd Rather Go Blind." I had used that instrumental initially. And I just sent it to the family. I just kind of wanted to do something nice. And also as a way for, it's like, thank you for having me be a part of this, because it opened up my eyes to how one person's death can affect so many different people. And I seen the kids getting angry and frustrated. So I was like, do you mind? It was just supposed to stay amongst them. And then one of our CBC News found out about it. And I don't even know how, because the funeral was covered on the news. And so they were asking, like, who's the singer that sang at the funeral? She touched everybody's hearts or whatever. And I didn't know it was on the news. And then all of a sudden I was getting phone calls, and I was like, well, I got this song that I wrote, and I sent it to them, and then they started covering it. So ironically, with Tyson's stories, that I ended up finding out several years later that he's actually a distant cousin of mine. So yeah. And I've performed that song, like, I've even performed it in Atlanta. I was told, hey, you better be careful what you're doing over here. Like, you don't want to piss people off. And I was like, I didn't even think about that. Like, you know, and I performed that song everywhere. And to the point where I performed it, and I've had on 2 separate occasions, a person come up to me and say, you know, Tyson was my cousin, because I always explain the history before I sing the song. So I think, to me, like, when they came up to me and were like, you know, thank you for that, and just the level of appreciation of somebody actually paying attention to those stories, especially in Toronto. We don't really, until COVID, we haven't really spoken about like issues. A lot of people think these things don't happen in Canada and that everything is like gumdrops and lollipops, but it's real, and it's so dangerous and detrimental because it's not spoken about, that we don't really have outlets to talk about these type of things. Like, literally happening in COVID is when we're allowed to, not allowed, but a lot of people jumped on the whole Black Lives Matter trend. So I have a song called "The Revolution Has Been Televised," where I'm calling people out, you know, when these protests die down and all these Instagram opportunities are over, I hope you guys still keep that same energy, because a lot of people are just now kind of capitalizing off of the plight of the Black community. And some of them are Black people, unfortunately.
Okay, so we were talking about basically how some people might react to the song as opposed to your initial meaning for it, and
Right.
your song, basically about the revolution. Now, I got to say this: me and you share a lot of the same sentiments, especially when it comes to people keeping that same energy.
Mm.
Because a lot of times, I personally feel like for some people, it's an Instagram post.
Yeah.
It's a Facebook post. It looks good to put on your best revolutionary gear or your best Black Lives Matter gear, or I can't, whatever the case may be, and take a pic. Like, especially when everything went down with George Floyd.
Right.
And there was protests across the United States. And I used to see people, I'm like, man, I've never even, people I personally know, and I've never even seen of anything conscious. You know, you too busy trying to get high and get ladies. Like, now all of a sudden, you got on all black and you got your fists up, like, stop. Like, you know, let's keep the same energy. Now, the one thing for me, especially when it comes to the African-American community, I don't even want to say it. Sometimes I feel like we can't just have that energy when the lives are lost of the Black race at the hands of another race.
Right, exactly. I totally agree. Oh, I caught so much slack for saying that. And I was like, look, I've done the whole like blame whitey. But then there comes a point in time when we have to be accountable for our own actions and how we treat ourselves as well too. It's like if you see a girl who's out there saying like, respect me, but every time you see her, she's half naked. It's like, well, if you're not respecting yourself, how can you expect me to respect you? So I do understand that there's a history as to why we are the way that we are. But if you, to me, are bright enough to say that, oh, we are the way that we are because of the effects of slavery, the African diaspora, et cetera, then you're smart enough to do better. Like once you're aware of what the problem is, when they say when you know better, you do better. Yes. So I feel like a lot of us, and as a Black woman, I mean, that's something that like I'm very outspoken about. I'm very much a modern day revolutionary. And being a female, it's very faux pas, cliche. Like a lot of people, it's like, oh, she's a biatch or whatever. But it's like, you know, if I was a man, I would be considered, you know, a revolutionary. But as a female, it's like, oh, you know, just take pretty pictures and you don't have to touch base on those topics. And, you know, you could just be half naked and people will buy your albums. But for me, I'm just like, you know, I feel like a hypocrite when I know that I have the mentality to do better. I know a lot of what our issues is. I can't change the world by myself, but I know that I can change how I deal with certain things or respond to certain things and react to a lot of stuff. So I do feel me, especially working in the Black community, my biggest fight does come from my own people.
Okay, I'm glad. Let's segue into what I want to talk about. So I was last night. I was watching Cinnamon Says.
Yeah.
And you had an episode where you were talking about the industry, especially when it comes to Canadian-based artists and you guys not getting the support from within.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that and how you feel, because I don't think it's just Canadian-based. I think Atlanta artists feel that way about Atlanta and so on and so on. But let's briefly talk a little bit about that, and especially coming from where you're from.
Right. So with Cinnamon Says, it was something that I started up in COVID because like everybody was kind of losing their mind. And I was losing my mind as well too. And so I decided that I wanted to just kind of like do something, step outside of the box that we don't normally do in Toronto, which is, like I said earlier, talk about our issues. So with that, basically what I was trying to say is that, how do I explain it? So when you're in Atlanta, when you turn on the radio, you hear a lot of Atlanta artists. Predominantly Atlanta artists, and at least predominantly American artists. When you're in Canada, we have a station on Thursdays for a couple of hours that plays Canadian content, and you got to scramble to get on that show. And you got to do a lot of kiss ass, and no disrespect to Toronto, but it is what it is. Like, it's not really about the music. It's more about who you know. And the fact that we'll have something like called, you know, the All Canadian Hour. These are commercial radios. Of course, there's, you know, little internet radios and stuff that have started up. And in terms of actual commercial radios where you can get your, Nielsen BS and royalties and stuff like that, not many of them play Black or urban Canadian artists. And that niche is filled with people like Drake and The Weeknd and Alyssa Cara and Justin Bieber, because you have a certain amount of Canadian content and then a certain amount of, you know, top 20 or top 10 or whatever it is. So those 5 kind of cover all that. So then they kind of don't really necessarily look for the independent artists or the up and coming artists, so to speak. And it's been this way for about 20, 25 years. Like I do a lot of research into the history of Toronto. And I do a lot of, like I started an actual talk show called Real Talk with Alicia Cinnamon, where I interview the veterans that started off the foundation of Toronto, because we don't have artist development in our city. We don't, in a lot of Canada, we don't have like musical conferences. We don't really, I think we have one A&R that some people know of. We don't have like the equivalent of a Def Jam or a Bad Boy or any of that stuff. So the one blessing now that COVID has kind of forced everybody to be independent is that Canada's already been independent. Like we don't know what it's like to wait for the record label to say, hey, do this and do that, etc. We've already been kind of grinding and hustling. So that is the benefit. But in terms of the support, like I said, everybody and their mother is an artist, and nobody really works together unless you're from like a certain clique. And one of the biggest fights that we have, like if you aren't like social media, you're following most Toronto artists or Toronto DJs, is the DJs and the artists don't get along at all. The DJs feel they're more important than the artists, and the artists feel now that we have Spotify, we don't need DJs. So it's that just not understanding how one hand washes the other, I would say.
The unfortunate part about this business and our culture, I think that's been a problem definitely since the 2000s worldwide. Yeah. Because at one point in time, and because I'm older, at one point in time, I think the DJs operated from a standpoint of we want to break music.
Exactly.
They did.
Thank you.
But
thank you.
Somewhere along the way,
yes,
the wavelength shifted and DJs started feeling slighted because they feel like, okay, I played so-and-so record and I was playing it in my spot and people knew about this record. And when he rose to prominence, he wouldn't even say hi, or I couldn't even get him to come to the club that was playing the record first. So I think at some point in time, DJs started to develop a little envy, and which maybe led to egos because you had record labels starting to give DJs record deals.
Yeah.
And like now, if you look at over the past 5 years, one of the most consistent hip hop artists in the hip hop culture is DJ Khaled, who's never rapped a verse.
I know.
So,
yeah,
you know, and I'm not knocking Khaled, but I can understand a lot of DJs felt left behind.
Yeah.
And very few DJs want to break records.
And that's a fact. Like I've had major DJs tell me like, I love this song, but because it's not top 10, there's nothing I can do with it. And it's like, you know, get at me when it starts to bubble. And I was like, well, if you put it on your show, it might get there. And again, because my dad was one of the foundational DJs in particularly reggae and dancehall in Toronto, I like grew up watching him like leave the house with his crates, and you know, like when he got a new record, the excitement and the thrill of getting the record and the concept of being the first person to play that track or play that artist. Now it's like, even when you go into clubs, it's like a playlist. And nobody wants to step outside of that box. And it's like, I literally can tell in my head, okay, I know the DJ is going to play this song next, and then that song next, and that song next. And they're like, look, this is what everybody wants to hear. If, you know, Beyonce has a new track that's bumping, everybody wants to hear Beyonce. And it's like, not to say that you can't play those stuff, but where's the thrill in, you know, playing what everybody else can play? Like, and also I found a lot of DJs were getting a little bit more relaxed in the sense, like, because I do showcases and parties and stuff. So for me, I like, if I personally, I usually only hire 1 or 2 DJs. In the dance hall world, it's a little trick. There could be like 50 DJs on one party. And most of them show up prime time. Everybody wants to come at like 1 o'clock in the morning when the club is bumping, and then plays the same songs that the DJ already played earlier on in the night. And I remember before, like every DJ used to want to get there early so that you didn't play what the person before you played, because, you know, that was considered like whack. So to me, just seeing that whole transition of being in this like weird space where it's like, I'm known for being pretty hard on the DJs in Toronto, but it's like a love that I have for them because I put them on so many shows and I do so much. And it's like, I bring out new artists, new DJs, and I'll be like, okay, here's your platform. Just try to stay away from doing what these guys are doing and it'll work for you. But then they get kind of caught up in it, like, you know what, I just want to play what everybody else is playing because I'm scared that what if I play this song in the club, and I don't know if they think everybody's gonna walk out. I don't know.
Because I manage artists as well, and I've had DJs say, well, y'all need to get the record hot. And I'm like, well, I'm coming to the person who I thought gets the record hot. Like, where do I take my record to get it hot?
Exactly.
Other than to a DJ? Do I take it to the stove, the microwave? Like, what the hell's going on here? So let's talk about your sound. Yeah. Like, what do you categorize your music as? Dancehall, reggaeton, R&B?
I have my whole own genre. I call it rhythm and soul. One of the biggest things that has kind of been about me is like, what is she? Does she rap? Is she a rapper? Is she a singer? Is she hip hop? Is she reggae? I come from a very diverse background. My dad's side is Jamaican and Cuban. My mom's side is from St. Kitts Nevis in Portugal, and she was born in Britain. So when you're in Canada, like, what do they call it? America is called the melting pot because you're American. When you're in Canada, you're Jamaican or Cuban or Dominican or whatever first. Canadian is not really a culture. Like, we don't know, like, what's a Canadian food or what's the Canadian dream. It's just kind of a place that you go to. So me being born and bred in Canada, I'm in this weird space where there's so many different cultures that I grew up in. Like the school that I went to, we had a lot of Sri Lankan music, we had a lot of Indian music, and they would blend their beats with like a Sean Paul beat, a nice reggae beat, but it would be over like a Hindi or Indian track or Indian lyrics, but a dancehall beat. So for me, it was like, I grew up where 1 minute I could be listening to, Avril Lavigne or Bare Naked Ladies. The next minute I'm listening to Sean Paul or Bob Marley. The next minute it's Lauryn Hill or Beyonce or SZA or whatever. Like, we don't have one set culture. And that's why Drake has been so successful, because he doesn't just do one type of music. He kind of made his own as an OVO Sound, because that's the reflection of Canada. Is we're called the tossed salad. We still have our individual parts. We haven't completely melted together. So yeah, okay. Rhythm and soul is my sound.
Speaking of Drake, what do you feel like his contributions have been to opening the eyes of the masses to Canada?
Drake is an ambassador, and it's funny because even in Toronto, he does get a lot of hate. Like, they say familiarity breeds contempt. I know when I'm in Atlanta, and as soon as I tell them I'm from Toronto, it's like they find every Drake song that they could possibly, if I'm walking into it, I'm like, oh, it's not that serious, guys. I don't know him. Like, so it's one of those where, and it's amazing, but it's also like, you can't just, like, to me, and we've had guys try to come at Drake and just totally get dismantled. Not because they're not, like, there's a lot better artists out there than Drake by far. Canada has mad talent, but you can't deny the man's work ethic and his business and his business sense. And me knowing, like, we watched him, coming up as Wheelchair Jimmy on Degrassi. Nobody thought Drake was going to be Drake. He, like, not to disrespect him, but he wasn't like the guy that you're like, oh my God, when he's on TV. Like, he was just like the guy on TV. He wasn't like the person that you thought was going to make it to the level that he was going to make it at. So when you see that, and it's like, you can't deny that he worked his butt off and opened up the door for people to look at us. However, it would be nice to kind of open up that door for other people and not necessarily monopolize everything for one person's self or one particular group of people. So that's where a lot of people kind of have that he doesn't really give back, so to speak, or if he does, it's mostly like, to people that he actually knows. And my personal thing that I notice about Drake is that he doesn't really put on Black women. Like a lot of the people that he endorses are Latinas and Filipino or everything else but Black women. And that's huge because that is a reflection of the Toronto and the Canadian industry. Like you don't see like me, and it's like people say, oh, but you're not even that dark skinned. I'm considered dark skinned enough in the Canadian industry to have a fight because I'm not, we don't even, it's not even about being biracial. It's literally being anything but Black, but doing Black music. So I feel like he could do a little bit more, but he's also mentioned multiple times that he feels shunned by the Black community. So maybe that's what it is. But I feel like in terms of where he came from, he could put on a little bit more people, but it could also be that, you know, he didn't get the love that he felt he deserved to get. So he doesn't feel obligated maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Who and there's no telling. I haven't, you know, seen, like he has OVO Sound, but I haven't seen an artist. I don't know artists. Like what artists are under OVO Sound?
I believe The Weeknd might have been. It's a lot of local artists. Drake is a smart person. He feels like you might pass him. He will make sure you're beside him, which is a smart business move if you want to remain at the top. So
over there. Stiff on.
So yeah, so there's that, but I mean, not many. You know, you might know better than me, but from what I see, like there's not that many. And again, it's Drake is not the first major Canadian. Like it's just he's the first one that made it to, you know, a Jay-Z type of level. But we've had like the Cardinals and Julie Blacks. Like these are people like if you know you study Canadian history, these people made like some waves, but a lot of them were darker skinned. And Drake had that ambiguous look because if people actually know, like Drake, again, he came out with a song with a big Black guy named Paige, and we all thought Paige was going to be the next big thing. But Drake was a little bit more, I guess, appeasing to the public eye or to, you know, the white masses, whatever it is. So they kind of went with him. So I think he really had a hard time proving himself in the beginning. But then once he just kind of stuck to his own lane, it was like, that's it. But now it's like, you're Drake. You don't need to prove anything else to anybody else. Like you could literally get your OVO label to the Universal level or the Drake level or the Bad Boy level and start signing people. And I don't quote me, but I don't think he has any females that are signed. And if he does, they're not Black. That I know for a fact.
I haven't heard of any. I have not heard of any.
Yeah.
All right. So look, let's talk a little bit about, we mentioned your single, The Revolution, has been televised.
Yes.
Let's talk about your latest single, All My Love.
Yes. All My Love is like a dance fused R&B song. I have been doing a lot of reggae and I was kind of getting boxed into the reggae category. And I was like, wait, like I actually started off as an R&B singer and you couldn't get me to do nothing else. But R&B was kind of dying down, especially in Canada. So then I branched over into the reggae for a little bit. But when I was with my producer, I went to the studio and he had like this beat, like he just played the beat for me. And I was just like, I can finally yell. Cause I write my own music. So sometimes you kind of get boxed into a formula. Like if I sing a Whitney Houston song, I can belt it out. But when you're writing your own stuff, sometimes you kind of don't push yourself to the limit that you could go. Where with this beat, it was like, I could really like belt the way that I want to belt. Cause I was kind of like, people like, I know you could do more with your vocals. So with this, I had done an electro funk song for a British artist that I just sold my vocals to. It was like mostly instrumental. And then, you know, you just do a 1-2 wailing or screaming over that. And it was fun for me. So I was like, if I like, you know, do a whole song like this. So that's where All My Love came from. It's a nice dance, R&B, house, funk kind of vibe that I just think is very universal and fun to play with.
All right, who was the producer you worked with on it?
His name is Robbie Khan. He's from Toronto.
Okay, all right. Do you feel like as a female artist, we always hear about different things of female artists. Do you feel like in 2021, female artists are getting respected and getting what they deserve? Or do you still feel like there's a long way to go when it comes to getting the respect and admiration from the men?
I don't think we're respected at all. I think we're tolerated. And it's clear as day when you see the response that people have to songs like WAP. but nobody complained when Dipset was doing Touch It or Not, or, you know, multiple songs that were like that, that we women had to endure. You know, Lil Wayne, I like him long hair, thick red bow. As a Black woman, you have to kind of be like, oh, this song's not for me. So there was so many like there's so many songs out there, and so the whole culture was designed to, in my opinion, or not designed, but, you know, when the greater masses caught on to hip hop, they made sure that it was structured in a way that it was very degrading to women, particularly Black women. So I feel like now when men see us doing what it is that they used to do, I feel like subconsciously, because they know it was degrading, they're like, why are you degrading yourself? So there's that. And then there's also the fact that I find a lot of the women are a lot more talented than the men. And a lot of men know that. Like for me, most of my competitors are not female artists, they're men. Like they will try to get the gigs that I get, or if I'm on a particular flyer, they feel entitled to just kind of intrude the day of and show up without having done any promotion or any of that stuff. They get paid more than us if you don't really, you know, have a backbone and fight. And they do a lot of sabotaging. Like I can't really speak for, again, most of my thoughts comes from the Canadian industry, and there's a lot of, how do I say this without getting myself in trouble? The Meg Thee Stallion situation with Tory Lanez doesn't surprise me as a female artist. And it's not to say that whatever transpired, but there is a lot of things like that with animosity or jealousy when it comes to male artists, and they will attach themselves to a female artist who is doing very well and drag down her career. So I feel like there's a lot of attention being paid to females, but I don't necessarily feel that we've gotten the respect yet.
Okay. All right. You released the album, Queen of the North, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
When can we expect the next full-length project?
Good question. Putting out the EP was so much work. It was a lot more work than I thought, especially because I actually released it in Atlanta. So there was like, I think it's like a W-8 form and all this stuff that I had to fill out that I knew nothing about. So I was kind of like, all right, I'm gonna do some singles for now, because that took me a long time to come up with the project. But I actually do have enough songs to do a full-length album. I just found that it was hard to, like, right now people are in a day and age where you just kind of put out music and let it go, and put out another song and let it go, and just keep putting out and putting it out. So it's like, to promote an entire album, I was like, okay, I really have to have the time to sit down and really come up with a marketing plan and a strategy, and not just have another album out there, but actually have physical copies and all that stuff. So my next album would definitely be a full-length album. I would say maybe in about a year or so, but right now it's just like, my goal was every other month to put out a single. So I've done about three of them since the year started.
Okay. Do you have a tentative working title, or you're going to surprise us?
I don't. I have a few, but nothing concrete yet.
Okay. All right. Well, being Michael's favorite spice,
Yeah.
again, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
I love when women have strong perspectives and views. You've definitely enlightened me. Man, hats off to you for being able to bring upliftment to funerals. Like, man,
Yeah.
I can guarantee you there are millions and millions of artists that could never even put themselves in the proper mind state to do that. Or there'd be artists there making people angry, like, so man, that takes a very, very special person. And I think you are a very special person.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Before we leave, tell us what makes you the Queen of the North.
What makes me the Queen of the North is that I am a very unconventional artist. I push a lot of buttons, sorry. I wear a lot of different hats, and I've pioneered a lot of things in Toronto like, I've only been in the game for, I would say, 7-8 years, but like in terms of like my all-female movement of my Northern Queens, and just getting a lot of females on radio, and being one of the first artists in my, I guess, age bracket, generational bracket, whatever you want to call it, especially as a female, to go to Atlanta and to get the international radio play and to actually drop an album out there and to still have people hit me up, you know, from Atlanta on a consistent basis. So when I wrote this, when I put the album out and I called it Queen of the North, it wasn't really people, perception is everything. It wasn't to be arrogant. It was basically saying like, I'm dropping this in America and I want them to know that Canada exists. So when you hear Queen of the North, like, you know, I can't remember her name, but that Canadian kid. So that's pretty much what it was.
All right. In closing, is there anybody you want to shout out or any messages you want to make sure got conveyed?
Shout out Jay Prez. Big up yourself. I appreciate you for all your, you know, the support and reaching out to me. I just want to shout out everybody that is going to watch this interview and just to really take everything I say with a grain of salt and understand that everything I'm talking about comes from my own experiences, and you determine your own outcome, you determine your own direction. So, you know, just thank you guys for always supporting me and allowing me to be the person that I am, because if I wasn't me, I don't think I would, if I had to conform to what society was telling me to do, I don't think people would like me as much. So I'm just really grateful that people accept me for being the person that I am.
All right. Well, thank you for being Toronto's favorite spice again. And thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.